ineffectual, that you just have to lash out if your life is threatened? How could he have the presence to be giving away his gifts because he was dying? And so I interrupted him and I said, Reverend, enjoy it. This is not possible. And I was just flabbergasted. And he said, no, you don't understand. Fear is not, it's not out there. It's inside us. It's just energy inside us. And we can transform it. We can harmonize it. We can move it into any form we want. And then he got up and he sort of did this little play act where it's like the lion who sees the prey. It doesn't just go like that. It recoils, and then it marshals its energy, and it goes for it. So we can do that with our fear. It is just energy. And we can turn it into courage to create the world we want.
Remarkable.
And that night, my daughter and I lay in our bunks for hours. What if we really believed that? We could do anything. We could do anything. And so, in a sense, a lot of my life continued. This was 8 years ago, and or more. And I realize now, every time I feel that fear of putting my voice out there, for example, or fear of just, challenging someone that makes me uncomfortable, because I live in this world of ideas, and so it's all about, I have this little corny trick that I do, which, when my heart starts pounding, I listen to what Reverend Enjoya told me, and so I say, oh, it's not telling me, you wimp, stop, you're too afraid, you're getting into trouble, just run and go the other way or freeze in your tracks. It's just saying, inner applause, you're doing what you should be, keep going. And so I have this message to myself, but on a very serious note, how we relate to fear may be the most important decision of our lives and the future of our planet, because fear is being actively stoked. And we know if we want to go in this track of challenging the concentration of power that we know brings out the worst in us by realizing our own power, we are going to be different from the pack. We're going to have to separate from the pack. But we evolved knowing that our survival meant staying inside of the pack. But now is the time the pack, the hyper tribe, is kind of heading in the wrong direction, and we have to step out there. So it's going to bring up some fear. That's what for most of us, there are some people who don't experience it, but not this person. So it's really, getting a grip is realizing that we maybe don't ever get over fear. We have to learn to walk with it. That's and to find good buddies. Oh, speaking of studies they've done, is I included this in here, I think, is the University of Virginia did a study where they put students at the foot of a hill into two groups. One group had a friend by the person in this group. Each person had a friend standing by them. They had heavy backpacks on. And the other group did not have a friend standing with them. And then they asked the students to judge, okay, how steep is that hill? And guess what? The students who had a friend next to them judged the hill to be much less steep, significantly less steep. So this is a big theme of choosing our buddies who really encourage us to go, to climb the hill, and knowing that our hills are less challenging if we are in good company. And so I think, there's a lot that we can work with here if we understand that life is not about getting over fear or avoiding being in situations that are frightening. It is really about choosing to go for that which we know is really addressing the roots of the problem. And that means walking into some new territory.
That's right. And what stands out in my mind, which I read this afternoon with great fascination, the way he conquered fear when the vice president. I was reading that and thrilled by it.
That was here in Boston.
Yes. Would you like to?
Well, that was the moment actually that I had this realization about the pounding heart, because this was a big theater in Boston where the debut of An Inconvenient Truth was showing. And again, it's trivial, but I think people could relate to it.
No, it's not trivial at all. In fact,
so
quite
here's
powerful.
the scene.
Yes.
Okay, Inconvenient Truth finishes, the lights go on, and then Al Gore begins to walk down, you know, the aisle to the stage, and I'm there with all my friends, and it was this feeling that I felt like a collective bow was about to happen. You know, I mean, that people were so impressed,
Yes.
and I realized that I wasn't in sync with my friends, that I was feeling very critical, and I was just amazed that here this person who'd been right in the heart of power in Washington didn't end that film by saying, look folks, you know, if we're going to really tackle climate change, we've got to build a democracy of our voices, because Exxon and, you know, the big companies, the oil companies, aren't going to do it. They have the power in Washington as it is now to block the changes that we know are necessary. I figured he'd go all the way because he'd seen that. Instead, what I mainly remembered at the end was changing light bulbs, you know?
It's incredible.
And so I felt so out of step. But as soon as I started to raise my hand, I could feel that bounding, because I knew that I would be out of step. But that's when that hit me, that if I could just rename this as inner applause, you know, inner applause, then I could do it. And so I got my hand up that night, but he didn't call on me. But the point was that I got my hand up.
That's right.
And it's made it easier. You know, I can stand up in front of 1,000 people and talk.
Of course.
But when I'm in a group, I don't know if other people experience this who are public speakers, but it's so different when you have to raise your hand and kind of claim the stage.
I'm exactly like you.
It's so different.
I don't know why.
I think it's because when we're asked to speak, that we're sort of, you know, that's our place.
That's right.
But when you raise your hand, you are demanding to have a voice. And I think we ought to get, and so it's so interesting now when I do speaking, and sometimes people will come to the mic and they'll refer to this, they say, my heart is pounding, and that meant I had to get up. I've never stood in front of people like this and asked a question. So we've got to practice our you know, understanding that it doesn't kill us. Actually, that adrenaline rush feels kind of good, you know. And stepping out and maybe making a fool of ourselves, or, you know, we're not as articulate as we wanted to be, but that working that courage muscle, you know. I call it civil courage.
Civil courage.
I got that term from a professor in Germany that I think is so perfect, that's what we need now. And so I tell the story, a different story in this book about something I didn't do in order to encourage my readers, because I want to grow into the person who could have done this, but I didn't think of it at the time. This was in the 2004 election, and I was in a church basement in a debate between my candidate, Lois Murphy, who was running for a seat in Congress, and Jim Gerlach, who was the Republican running. And he had put an ad, you know, the robo calls, you know? He'd put an ad on people's telephones that linked my candidate to the Taliban. And here she is, this upstanding, you know, feminist, and he linked her to the Taliban. And so I was going door to door that very day, and somebody said, are you with the Taliban lady? This was, people were taking this seriously.
Of course.
So here we are at the debate. All the people in the audience were told to be quiet, and just to remain quiet and to ask questions at the end and not to speak. And so my candidate asked Jim Gerlach to disown that ad, that dishonest ad, that fear-mongering ad that was totally dishonest. She said, would you disown this ad before we begin? And he refused. And nobody said a word. And later, I realized what I should have done. What I should have done to be true, to have civil courage, to be true to democracy. I should have been respectful, but I should have stood and just said to the group, I will remain standing until Jim Gerlach disowns this dishonest ad. This is not just an assault on my candidate. This is an assault on democracy itself, and I ask others to join me. And it would have been respectful. It wouldn't have been like those tirades at the town halls last August. But it would have been a statement, and it would have taken, my heart would have pounded out of my chest. But that is the kind of thing we must start to do. When we see that which is an assault on democracy, we must have that backbone. And so by telling this story now on television, I hope that so afterward, I did go up, I had the nerve to go up and say to him,